Hey Taurus, welcome to your full moon forecast. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. Yes, Taurus Sun, Taurus Moon, Taurus Rising. This is your full moon forecast for our full moon total lunar eclipse that is on November 8th, 2022. So thank you for being here. Welcome back, everyone. For those who are subscribed, monthly membership through Subscribestar, thank you for being here and all your contributions. And welcome to everyone. Now, you can have a sun, moon, or rising in Taurus. Of course, this reading and this forecast for this full moon is going to be from the vantage point of the Taurus rising person. But for all people with strong Taurus, or if that Taurus person in your life that you are hoping to understand a little bit more about yourself through them, then this forecast will give you some insight into the general themes related to Taurus people with this full moon total lunar eclipse. So, because Taurus, you are the salt of the earth. Truly and quite literally. And so we need you coming into this eclipse. I cannot impress upon you enough how important that is going to be. Yes, you are going through a lot of transition and change in your personality and your subjective experience of who you are. The North Node or the Ascending Node, which is part of why, well, entirely why we get eclipses, because the pathway of the lunar orbit over the ecliptic plane. This is the nodal axis, the ascending and descending node, the head and tail, the dragon. So we're all being pulled in this Taurus direction of natural harmonics, the living soil, stable, fixed earth energy. This is the trajectory for all of us right now, is to get back to the basics, essentially, when it comes to resources and the inherent value and worth of the world around us. This is where we're all being drawn to. So Taurus, this is coming right into the essence of who you are, how you identify yourself. And with all the Scorpio energy, of course, being the sign that the sun is in, causing this full moon lunar eclipse, but there's also Mercury and Venus, the south node, of course, being the descending node or the tail of the dragon. There is a lot of focus with the more personalized objects, luminaries, planets, in the area of relationship for the Taurus person, the one-on-one relationship. And it's inevitable that the entire form of relationship, whatever it is for you, Taurus, your partner, your spouse, your good friends, the people you have any kind of contractual relationship with, between you and your loved ones, you and your clients, you and your boss, or other way around if you are in that position, whatever it is, it's really about who you are in those relationships. You are brought out, your opposition is brought out in the seventh house. So, of course, Scorpio people are also going through this just as strongly as the Taurus people, because you are diametrically opposed. Taurus being the inherent value and worth, and Scorpio representing what we create when we come together. And so it's an intense sign. It is fixed, still waters. It is the abyss of our own experience and our subconscious. And Scorpio tendencies tend to be very brooding and intense and driven. So with the Taurus person being so fixed and stable, right, to the point of stubbornness, when they are in relationship, this deep intensity tends to make itself known. And the area of relationship will inevitably change, and change you as you are changing, right, with Uranus. And of course, this full moon in your first house and in your sign. So really coming down to how you feel in yourself, right, your intuitive and psychic and adaptive nature, right? The moon is your inner waters. So what has been transpiring just going through this eclipse in general has just been so deep-seated, but also so intense and present. So with the full moon, normally there would be a full illumination of the lunar surface for us to have that corresponding experience of full illumination of what otherwise is often dark and embedded within us, right? And so the sun is able to illuminate that, but because of the eclipse and the shadow of the earth basically cast on the moon, there's a distortion to what otherwise is a moment where we get to fully embody both sides of ourselves and be like, oh, I see how these things fit together. And how do I integrate them? So with the eclipses, we are meeting our own destiny at a soul level, right? What we are driven towards in order to evolve. And so it's not nearly as obvious. It's something that reverberates out over the next 6 months. But with these full moon eclipses, and especially the one that was in June, which was the other side of this, Scorpio full moon, there's still incredibly intense feeling. It's just that the feeling is distorted by the shadow and the what turns out to be the filter of the atmosphere that the light of the sun goes through and projects off of the lunar surface. Regardless if you think it's a hologram or a real spinning ball up there, it's still reflecting these things back onto us. And that's really what we're getting, is the frequency of those projections. And so it is very deep. What is red but the lowest end on the visible spectrum, the least amount of energy, the highest wavelength? And the root chakra, right? So invariably, Taurus, lots of sudden, disruptive, and deeply sensitive change or feeling of change in who you are, and trusting really that you are on the right path. And it is towards who you are that we're all, especially you, are evolving toward. It's just the Scorpio tendency in relationship, especially in relationship, is a tendency to really dive into the deep, dark abyss of yourself in relationship. And of course, there's a lot of focus on this right here, but I would encourage you, Taurus, to not forget who you are and to embrace, in some level, the kinetic change that is being brought to bear and to surface on some level, maybe not all the way, but it definitely in terms of your emotions about yourself that are going on with Uranus as basically part of this eclipse. So what we're going to do is just go through the next 2 weeks and look at the big themes that are related to Taurus people with all of the astrology. So what are we looking at right now? Well, we see, number one, it's not just the full moon eclipse. There's going to be a number of oppositions to Uranus in your sign with the sun, with Venus. Venus is happening on the 5th, by the way. So even before we get to the 8th, the 5th is when Venus and Uranus are in opposition. And Taurus, Venus is your ruling planet. So you're really gonna feel the tension in terms of maybe wanting to be satisfied, becoming aware that something has come full circle in terms of the way you relate to the world, to who you are in relationship, just being very sensitive to the entire form of the relationship. She is at her worst in Scorpio, or she's at her detriment. And so it's very easy for her to not be at her best in relationship. And so especially Venus here in relationship in Scorpio, there's a real tendency to engage in activity that could otherwise compromise the integrity of your relationships. You get what I'm saying? And falling into intoxicating or not very integral, integrous, I guess, if that's the word, the adjective that relates to integrity. And with the sun and Mercury also here, there's so much individual focus and expression and even mental energy in terms of who you are and who you've been in relationship. I would argue that the South Node is really an invitation to see how who you've been and that soul karma that is expressing itself in terms of your one-on-one relationships, that you can kind of see what has allowed you to really make new connections in the past, because there's something very much that needs to be let go of, Taurus, in terms of the nature of you in relationship. And the fifth is the first kind of like feels in the energetic feels, and a sense of what's comfortable and secure in relationship, as there may be a sudden change that is initiated or just activated in who you are, right? This is an unsteady time for Taurus people, but also an incredibly potent time for real change. And like I said, Taurus people are salt of the earth, and I swear we really need you as we go through this time. So the things that I notice, besides this consistent opposition, it'll be with Uranus and Mercury and Venus and the full moon lunar eclipse, is that asteroid. It's not even an asteroid. She's more like a dwarf planet asteroid series. So in astrology, we're looking at this dwarf planet that's really the Ceres in Roman and Greek mythology is the goddess of agriculture, the grain, so to speak, the cereals. And it's so fitting that this is in the sign of Virgo, because it's in the wheat and the harvest and the seasonal changes of the feminine aspect that allow for agriculture to be realized and utilized. And so she represents the triple goddess, or the triple feminine journey, because of her relationship to Persephone, which is her daughter, who gets tricked into the underworld and is trapped there. And so there's this whole process of her, the maid, right, the daughter, being in the underworld for a portion of time, which is when everything is barren and there is no growth, because Ceres is in mourning. And then she comes back up to the surface, receives her daughter again, and is filled with joy and a willingness to share bounty, right? And so the bounty is the Virgo energy. And I think this is very interesting that this in your fifth house, right? Because the other thing that really strikes me is that Saturn in particular is also part of this conversation over the next 2 weeks, because not only is Saturn in this T-square formation, you can see here, coming from Saturn down to Taurus with the especially Uranus. It's still in a square to Uranus. There's just so much unexpected and not always wanted change that is happening, especially for Taurus people, as their contribution to society and their mission, whatever that 10th house is for you, is standing really firm. And in fact, it is now outwardly almost projecting, or outwardly becoming the wall that has been building within, as Saturn was retrograde here. And so this is something that will continue to come up, because not only is Uranus still in a square to Saturn, but all of the Scorpio energy, it's all a lot of fixed energy that is in very tense aspects here. And Saturn in the 10th, it's like, Taurus, you are going to maintain this wall of determination and authority and discipline in terms of, you know, the 10th house is a lot of different things, and it can be, it's the materium of whatever it is you're contributing to build, whether that be society, whether that be your family, right? It's the actual economy itself and all of the institutions working together as a matrix, as a network, and it's the material aspect of it. So the nuts and bolts actually functioning as some sort of organic machine, right? It's the full organism, or the full forest in some ways. Taurus, I mean, with Saturn here, I think there's a lot of responsibility that you're feeling, possibly to maintain every resource you can possibly have, which is very difficult to let yourself go through personality and subjective change in how you identify and project yourself out into the world. That can be very difficult with Saturn holding firm in a house that has to do with, you know, where and what you are responsible for institutionally and what you're contributing to. But it also is kind of, yes, it will create tension with this eclipse and all of this energy that is pulling you back and forth between yourself and what relationships are, you know, how they're changing to influence the change in yourself. But in some ways too, this is kind of showing you all the work that's been done in this area is now going to hopefully pay off in terms of, you know, being an authority in that structure that is unshakable, because it is something more than normally the materium represented by Capricorn, which Pluto has just been coming and collecting, right? That's what Pluto is doing, is the Lord of the underworld, is the avatar of this process of gathering in through the decay process in order to redistribute the energy into new form. That's what creation is. And so belief systems and meaning and the narrative, I mean, it's just been going through it since Pluto's come into Capricorn for the Taurus person. And we're going to see some really strong connections, I think, as we go through these 2 weeks to Pluto again. But for the time being, what I think is very interesting here, besides everything I just said, Taurus, is we go back to Ceres, which is in your 5th house, right? Your voice, your heart's desire, your resonance, your creative expression being expressed, right? The 5th house is where we play, where we lust, where we romance, where we have joy and thrill and excitement. We take risks, right? We have fun in the 5th house. And Taurus, what's interesting is good old-fashioned hard work seems to be where you find the fun and the ability to take it all apart and to organize all the pieces, right? This is an interesting, and just doing the works, right? A Taurus person that's not doing something like this is lazy. That's how you fall into being a lazy Taurus, is that you don't have a passion that you are executing through very Virgo, meticulous, organized, works-oriented, service-oriented types of activities, right? Whatever it is. It's mutable earth. It's moving the things around. And so Ceres here is one way that it seems to be, besides maybe up here with Jupiter and Neptune, it's really some of the most favorable connection to all of this eclipse energy for Taurus, which is, you know, what is the root system? Number one, your root system being the 4th house and Leo, but what does it allow you to, what is it that you're doing that's actually bearing fruit, right? And it goes back to something I think it may be kind of explosive here if it's been suppressed for too long. But if you keep the eye on the prize here, right, this trine over to Uranus and to the North Node as well, a very stable energy of an earth trine, and take from, you know, where the sun is and Mercury is, they come into a cazimi or in a conjunction at the full moon itself. So again, having a sense of what is, you know, where the real creation comes from is being a vessel for the transpersonal force to move through you in relationship. It can be really blessed in some ways, or you can invest your own voice when you really when you really allow this energy to come up from below the surface. Now, it can be spectacular. It also, and if you are a creative person, or if you're a good creative outlet in this way, then I think that'll be very helpful, whatever it is. But it's going to come through what not only bears fruit, but, you know, what is actually, you know, an extension of your passion. And I think that's going to be really instrumental, I think, in being able to seriously ground this energy that otherwise, even in itself, may be eruptive. So having an outlet, having your voice have an outlet, whatever it is, your expression, your passion, your sense of joy, it could be explosive. And with Uranus involved, I feel like these two things are basically activating each other. So you want to allow I would say, what's going to feed your passion. There we go. Because Ceres, being this goddess of the grain and agriculture and representing the pathway of what Pluto ultimately represents, but also the life-giving of it as well. And I think that's going to really help you, Taurus, is to tap into what is not only, what is going to feed your passion, what is going to support it, what is your passion also supporting that moves into the next cycle. This is some energy, I think, that's really going to help ground the Taurus person when a lot of stuff down to the essence of identity and relationship is going to be really really challenged. Okay, so let's start going through this next 2 weeks, Taurus, and look at some of these themes here. So back to our eclipse right here. Let's make sure we can see all of these things. This doesn't have the asteroids on it, so it doesn't have the same geometric shapes, right? All the angles and aspects, but this allows us to cycle through it a lot easier. So the 8th is also the midterm elections. We're pretty aware of that by now, and it's going to be coming up after this eclipse, right? So the feelings will be intense. There will be a real sensitivity to who you are, Taurus, but it may not be fully illuminated to your conscious awareness in the way that an eclipse normally will, but it'll still be very powerful. So just be easy on yourself, Taurus, and be the salt of the earth people that we know that you are, and realize even the earth has to undergo tectonic activity and shifting and changing, right? It's all part of the alchemical process, and that's all we're here to do, right? We are all here to evolve and grow through that alchemical process. So as we go through this day by day, we're going to start seeing more of the themes. Now, the thing is that the same place that the eclipse is happening is essentially where Uranus is, still in its retrograde, right? So it's more of like this under the surface type of kinetic energy, or certainly, Uranus is always kind of looking towards the future. It represents our spiritualized consciousness and kind of, exiting out of the body, the atmosphere, the materialism. And so going back is really something that just kind of there is no going back, because time is not part of the Uranian realm, right? And so this retrograde feels like it may look like it's going backwards, just like all the retrogrades, but it's really not. It just seems like it's more under the surface, or it's more embedded in the deeper structures of the mind or the collective mind, if that makes sense. So this theme is going to keep coming back up, though, every time something comes into opposition with Uranus. So first it was Venus on the 5th, and then it was the sun and the full moon eclipse that was really bringing that up. And then right after that, the sun is exactly opposite of Uranus. So there may be a lot of things that come up emotionally, and certainly that are going to come up for the Taurus person. Ooh, let me fix this real quick while I'm speaking to you. The Taurus person during this time, that has to, you be like so identified with and really looking to your relationships and the people in these relationships to help define you. And it's the eclipse actually that sets a deep soul journey up, right? It initiates and sends the Taurus person off on a journey that has to do with changing in terms of who you are in relationship. Okay, let me make sure that, okay, now there's a lot of focus on this area, and every time there'll be something that comes around that really just, it's so restless with Uranus in the first house and so unknown about who you are. And especially for someone who's got a Taurus rising or any Taurus sign, to be very secure in oneself and to go through these under the surface, but very disruptive shifts and seismic activity. And every time something comes into opposition with it, the sun or Mercury, especially, it's just going to keep bringing this up. And so it comes right after the eclipse. And so that is a lot more like, ego battling, ego battling with kind of being hyper focused and identified through the relationship. Whereas Uranus is like, we can't even, you are not even settled. How are you going to be able to identify with the current status and form of relationship? And with Scorpio, you really are just sinking and sinking and sinking to be like, how am I going to learn the truth of this situation, right? And it's relative to who you are at any given moment in these relationships. So the other thing that's going to come up as a major theme is all of these squares to Saturn. So the responsibility to whatever it is you're contributing to, whether it's your family, your career, your business, the larger institutional structure of society, whatever it is, that square is going to come up multiple times from the Scorpio side of things. So when we get to the 10th, right, and we're getting real close to that 11/11 opening as well, we get here. And what I think is really interesting about this time is that, yes, there's going to be another kind of challenge to very specifically, to what you are your capacity to transmit some sort of knowledge or wisdom or information from the space of your relationship, the form of your relationship, what it feels like to you, how you're identified with it. And yes, the square is going to come from Saturn being like, well, that's great, but this is your responsibility to this structure, whatever it is for you. And in Aquarius, it's an idealized social construct. It is the resonance of the collective in and of itself. And if that had been implanted by way of the Saturn retrograde these last few months in Aquarius, in terms of the inner scaffolding of your contribution, your mission, where your power is released, then it's not going to falter when that particular resonance starts to lose its power potentially. And that may be challenged. In fact, I think it is going to be challenged very much by what's coming through, what you are identifying with in relationship. But you have to be really discerning in this area of Scorpio, because channeling leaves you open to messages that are not necessarily what you want to come in. They're not always what they seem, right? Scorpio, there's a lot of secrets when Scorpio is involved. And, Taurus people tend to be, I think, very almost private in some ways, and very reserved in terms of their relationship. And it's really, you're just keeping all of that energy and power to themselves. And that's not a negative or positive. It also could have to do with just being very private, and very kind of, aware of the depth of relationship and not wanting to necessarily broadcast every aspect at the deep bottom of certain relationships, right? So, but again, the square, it certainly is going to challenge this, and it's going to challenge it in a way of like, well, this is the message I'm getting. This is what I'm receiving. This is where my mind is picking up on this. And in terms of this one-on-one interaction, and it's going to be in a square to, yeah, but what is the authoritative party line here in this area of contribution? This is going to be really important. I think a lot of Taurus people should take these squares very seriously as turning points and moments of growth, moments of humility, moments of frustration, moments of ego battles, the child and the father, right? And get something out of that tension or friction as a catalyzing force. And it's just gonna, like I said, Sun and Mercury are both going to square Saturn during this 2-week period, right, since the eclipse. So, excuse me. The other thing that's cool, I think, is that the moon is in Gemini during this time. And Gemini is the second house for Taurus. Mars, which rules this, at least part of this eclipse, right, is because Mars rules Scorpio, just as much as Pluto rules the larger transpersonal nature of Scorpio. Mars rules the part of Scorpio, the masculine part of Scorpio, the drive to and urge to blend, to put that energy towards something, to allow that spark of life to move through and propel us into those deep waters, right? And so, just stationing retrograde Taurus, I mean, the world around you is really characterized by this mutable spirit, right? That is able to mold and change, just like the wind can change. And that's threads to be woven together, right? And for Mars to go retrograde, I mean, we all got kind of slammed on either there was an about face here, and this is an about face in terms of your what you've been outputting. Now, when you have Mars moving through the second house, just kind of in general, especially in the natal position, there's always going to be output. So as it's transiting through your second house, it has been outputting in terms of your inherent resources, your wealth, your energy has been outputting in this data processing system. It has been outputting in terms of weaving the threads of reality that you identify as objective. And in the retrograde, it's almost like you may have started to have to pull some things apart because you found, like if you're knitting or crocheting and you're just going along, and then after a while you're like, oh, this is a spot that is corrupted or something, right? You have to go back and unweave it, unwind it. And many people, I think, felt that about face. But the other thing is that it kind of is conserving your output right now, which I think is a good thing in some ways. And so to embrace that and to embrace the idea that the world around you is mutable air. It is something that responds to It is as fickle as the wind, but as steady as your own breath, right? In and out, in and out. And at the top of each breath and at the bottom of each breath, there's a 0 point of stillness. And in fact, it's the same breath that's going in and out. It's just the ebb and flow of that process. And if you can really, I think this is going to be really important for Taurus people. And as the moon moves through Gemini and meets Mars during this time, it's going to increase your sensitivity to this process of going back over what you've already maybe pruned and making sure that you got everything that you wanted. Maybe there's another pass that you have to do, and you're not moving forward, but you're also not outputting any more energy. You're kind of conserving it because you're going back over what you've already done, or just taking stock of what's already been done in this area. And I think the moon, around the 10th and 11th is going to be really allowing you, the moon is exalted in Taurus, okay? So there is a strong connection to you and the moon, especially if you have a moon in Taurus, right? This is going to be a sensitivity to those things in your resources or in the objective world around you that it's still difficult to really project yourself into, because who you are is what is going through this rapid upheaval and under the surface kinetic, reorganization. But at the very least, you can take your ability to adapt and certainly to sink into the world around you and find that inner action in your resources that is pulling, and there's this quincunx energy that we're going to see all through with Mars and Gemini and all of the late Scorpios we go along. And this, I think, is going to, this moon on the 10th and 11th crossing this point is going to give you this kind of like, oh, okay, I feel in my actual physical feels here and in the collective energies, the natural harmonics, my own DNA, my own lineage, right? My own resources, feeling like, okay, this is what has been cut away or pruned away so far, and go back over it. Maybe you are unraveling some things here. Maybe you're unraveling because you're going to bring them back together. And the quincunx energy here, let's move actually forward, and then we'll talk about the trines to Neptune, because there's a lot of those as well. on the 11th, Venus comes into that quincunx with Mars. She's the first one. And of course, these two are really meant to balance each other out in some ways. So let's see, Venus is in this quincunx. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a green line. It's a 150-degree angle. And it's happening 25 Scorpio and 25 of Gemini. And so quincunx is a moment of opportunity, right? Because these things don't fit, and they don't fit. So you're like, how can I transmute these things and make something that seems to not fit actually fit and create something brand new? And this is very close to where the last full moon lunar eclipse was, which was in June. And so now we're kind of getting into that territory again of what that was, but not from an eclipsed internal position where it was just intensely emotional and you had no idea why. Now it's going to be identified with, and for Taurus, definitely something that you strongly feel in your senses. And Mercury even is going to identify this through the lens of the mind and cognition when it comes to relationship, seeing a whole new level to who you are in relationship, the nature of your relationship. And it's going to seem like, well, how's that fit with my action just over here? Like, unraveling what I've done so far, conserving my energy or going back and keep pruning, right? And I think that the quincunx, the opportunity here is that Mars does rule Scorpio. And so there's an opportunity to consider how there's more to cut away. And because you cut some away already, you can actually see a whole new part of the canopy, if that makes sense, right? So if you've ever pruned, really strongly pruned something, like a big bush or anything else, and you pruned it, and now you go back and you're like, oh, okay, and you're looking up, from underneath, or you have a sense of what's going on inside the plant, like in the canopy, or just that you understand now a little bit more about how these processes work, and you have now another perspective that is able to see through the surface. It's going to seem like they don't fit, but strangely enough, this is very activating for the Taurus person, especially 11/11, all right? And it starts with Venus, which is your ruling planet. So we know that Venus and then the Sun and then Mercury are all going to have this quincunx, this opportunity to practice an integrative an integration through things that don't seem to fit together. And maybe it's because Mars is just like, I'm going to stay over here in my corner. I'm not even dealing with what's over here in relationship land. And you're not going to be able to really help but have your attention pulled back, but it's going to be in what you learn and what you discover as the next layer because of the mirror of relationship, okay? Nothing wrong though, and with staying over in your space and doing your own little thing over here. And like I said, the moon, when it crosses Mars before we get to this point on the 11th, is gonna, the sensitivity and kind of the wanting to really nestle in and get into this kind of inner productive space is going to be really strong. I'd say take advantage of it personally, and be willing to do the about face in your own resources, right? And where they're going, where you are maybe pulling them back in, right? Instead of outputting all the time. That's another option as well. And you'll want, and just because you are sensitive to the underlying structure in your relationship does not mean you have to actually give anything, right? You're kind of pulling yourself back in your energy and your action. Maybe you're just paying attention. And I think that seems where the potential for activation or transmutation can come from with these quincunxes over to Mars. So 11/11 is certainly, just like the 5th, it's not going to disappoint. The Sun is going to be square to Saturn, another part of that conversation. in terms of where your responsibility is. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, so the 10th to the 11th through the 12th, we're going to see Venus and Mercury both in a trine to Neptune. Now, we haven't talked about this at all yet, and in fact, there is a really cool water trine that looks like it's going to show up. I believe it's like the 14th. And in fact, it is. There's going to be something really cool on like the 14th to the 15th. That's going to be an opportunity to really soar above all of this and still be completely intact emotionally. So Neptune in its retrograde in Pisces in your 11th, right? I mean, we're getting to this point now. We're getting really, there's no, it's willful ignorance now, right? The intuition and the capacity to tap directly into source awareness or divine consciousness is very deep, and it's very internal, and the fog is not as present, although the depth and the vastness can be very overwhelming. So in the 11th house, Taurus, this is about, materializing some sort of conscious ideal in the social setting that you find yourself in. And the 11th house is where your voice in this social setting, the quality of it, the nature of it, it is the social organism as a whole. And so this is a very powerful, dissolving type of energy that Neptune has had on the Taurus person. It's been really difficult, I think, to establish a boundary when Neptune is just the ocean of all, the ocean of it all, just, dissolving even the very stone itself. And certainly creates it dissolves any barrier, right, that there is between the individual voice and the collective voice. And so in some ways it's been just absolutely can be really beautiful and dreamlike here in Pisces, especially with Neptune. But it also, I think, up until the retrograde, may have been a little bit too dreamy and fantasy oriented, and really just living in the delusion and the false light, right? And so it's been a painful but clarifying Neptune in retrograde. So there are these trines that are going to happen with Venus and Mercury also leading, on either side of 1111, which is a trine to this Neptune. And I think this water trine is, again, in a sense, it's the ability, really, especially with Venus, right, your ruling planet, and Mercury, that is learning from the context of a relationship in and of itself, how to take these base drives that are brought out of the Taurus person in relationship, the drive and the urge and that hunger of Scorpio to investigate and get into the deepest part of the relationship, how to take that and to transubstantiate it, or to bring it to a higher, more etheric type of energy, to bring the animal nature in terms of this fixed, deep drive and bring it into something more subtle and etheric, right? To take this rabbit energy and have it change into a fairy, right? It's kind of fantastical, but the idea here is in this process. Now, the trine to Neptune, boy, I think that we're going to emotionally, especially you, Taurus, have a really good idea and awareness, a mental awareness about how to take that energy in your relationships and be able to transubstantiate it and able to transform it into a more higher, potent energy. And this has a lot of signature of just, especially if you're a Pleiadian starseed, and we'll get into that, because now we're getting into territory that is opposite the Pleiades. And so still Pleiadian starseed energy in late Scorpio, and getting close to the full moon lunar eclipse, like taking that raw energy and moving it through your upper chakras basically to the crown, right? And having it be etherized. There's something very powerful here in this connection to Neptune, which is really giving us access in a way to what we have to give in order to achieve this ideal at a societal level for the Taurus person. And talk about, and we're all going to have this moment, but for the Taurus person, it's really in like the relationship itself and whatever that is. And, the energy that's generated there being able to turn into and etherized as part of what is meant to be given in order to substantiate a consciously compassionate and cosmic society. Right? I think that's pretty, again, Taurus, we need you because you are holding kind of the codes for how it can go for all of us, right? Especially with the North Node in your sign. I mean, everything kind of points to your chart being the chart of all of us. And so your experiences are really modeling that. So 11-12, right? So it's Mercury trine Neptune, Venus trine Neptune, and then we come into the 13th, and so we have another quincunx to Mars, this time Mercury, right? It's still getting into that X-ray look now, and now it's coming through the mind, which is something that you can, a lot of learning and investigation, like having the capacity, as Mercury does, to go into the underworld of the relationship and come back out with some information. And you had already had Venus that was in that same quincunx that was much more of a feeling in the senses about it, an intuition, an embodied reaction or response, a sense of value and comfortability in relationship in this quincunx. Now it's Mercury, and it's like, hey, all right, let's actually go down there and start extracting data about this, to bring back up. And again, Mars is going to be like, no, dude, I'm like over here in my space doing my thing over here. So again, finding a way that you can make these things fit together. Well, you take what you are getting from the depth of these relationships, the dynamic and the power dynamic, and being able to take that as a resource in and of itself and apply that to your own process. This is very key, I feel, because we get to the 13th, right? So here's the 12th. Now we're getting to this really awesome kite. So let's see if I can show it to you. Oh, it's coming. I think it might be the 13th actually, because it has a lot to do with where Lilith is in an opposition. There we go. Starting to build. Lilith is starting to build into this. There we go. Opposition. And the moon will be conjunct, right? This is powerful. So this is actually the 14th. So we get to the 14th, and there is this incredible kite that's formed with Lilith conjunct the moon in Cancer, and the sun will also be in that same trine to Neptune that I just talked about. Wow. And Mercury is in a sextile to Pluto. So number one, this has got tons of Procyon energy around it. If you're familiar with that, if you have a Starseed reading from me or anyone else, or you're just familiar with Procyon in terms of fixed star energy, this is the bottom of the kite, right? This is the base of it. But, and the tendency here, Taurus, is to absolutely protect and cloister your own consciousness and to the point where you may pull yourself in an effort to absolutely like survive the storm that Pluto ultimately represents in terms of its power. The power that comes through to decimate in terms of your belief system, in terms of your religion or philosophy of life, or your understanding of what it all means and what your relationships mean, right? Pluto is, it's coming through and releasing power through the process of, destruction. And the tendency, I think, again, Taurus, and this is not a terrible thing. This is just what it is, right? The capacity to keep that part of your mind and your own consciousness right in front of you. The third house is right in front of you, and to protect it, and to also not and to also realize that facing this cathartic storm, this Pluto up here in Capricorn in your ninth house, is actually what is going to lead you to, up leveling essentially. But just like the Procyon beings were forced underground in order to survive, right, and to stay hidden, and what it actually did is allowed them to deepen their connection to themselves, to life, to the planet, to make their resonance so powerful, or their core so powerful, that their resonance shot out beyond anything artificial and was able to put out the beacon essentially. So the memory of this, the adapting to it, and then with Lilith, I mean, just the straight preservation of the human template in your own consciousness is going to be really important, Taurus. And then the kite, right? This tension is the spine of the kite, and everything surrounding it connects to, again, what we are all giving in order to bring about or substantiate this cosmic ideal of society, what it really means, and then also the connection to these last degrees of Scorpio, right? Opposite the Pleiades, right? Making a connection also to Procyon and Pleiades as well. And late Scorpio, right? You are getting into the capacity to adjust very quickly to the shifting environment, right? To the outward projection of cultural values that are really so intensely projected that they instill a sense of belonging and pride, right? But it also can really hijack the individual's consciousness. So, but I see it as an opportunity to really identify mentally with the energy that was at that last eclipse, the full moon eclipse in June. So remember how you were feeling then, what was going on for you, especially in terms of how you were, again, feeling in terms of your self in relationships. And this has much, and Mercury does normally rule the third house. It rules your second house, actually. So the ability to adjust yourself to the changes in a way that's very objective and pattern oriented, so that you, and in a way too that you realize that that kernel of your own consciousness individually, no matter what's going on outside of you, or even as your understanding or your religious perspectives are absolutely being blown away, there's this sense of identifying with that which instills that sense of like pride and belonging in terms of your relationships, right? And I feel like that this kite is exactly what we're going to need come Monday the 14th, this ability to really see the opportunity in that really strong tension with this very dark energy, a moon and Lilith in Cancer. I mean, this is all very deep feminine waters here, along with Scorpio, of course, and Neptune and Pisces. So, and then Pluto involved as well. It's going to be okay, Taurus, but just know that, and it depends on where that ninth house is for you, those cusps, you know what I mean? That could also feed over into your 10th house, depending on where your cusps are. But just know that this is an opportunity. These kites provide a structure around a major tension that allows you to fly, to soar, right? To soar. Now we're going to have the trines over to Jupiter. That's now in Pisces, still in its retrograde, but in a trine to, but it's in Pisces now, which is one of the places it is happy to be in because it co-rules. So when Jupiter stations direct at the new moon on the 23rd of November, that we will talk about very briefly, it's going to station direct in Pisces. And so coming back now into your 11th house, Taurus, there's something about the principles, of love, right? And love being the real basis of redemption, right? Scorpio is where you have to face yourself. You have to face what your relationship has created. You have to face what you have participated in creating in any relationship. And it's the love that we have for each other that can really redeem ourselves. But there is this essence, especially with Venus, right? Of real balance and harmony and beauty, and really wanting to be in that is I get this sense here that there's going to be a wanting and appealing to that, like some energy that's going to appeal to that part of ourselves, and for you, Taurus, it's going to come right from your relationship, right? Like pleading for the lives of someone, right? Or someone in your life actually looking for redemption from you. And, the light of source is the light of source, right? And it's only when it comes through a prism of sorts that we see the full spectrum of the visible light, the rainbow and the visible light spectrum, and how is variability in frequency and energy, but it all comes from the same source. And so the thing that's important to consider here is that Jupiter is actually still retrograde. And in the 11th, the tendency is to want to kind of, expand and get large in this social setting. And I would say, Taurus, just kind of hold off here, because there's some emotional kind of cohesion that needs to be addressed, or at least identified with, and certainly felt with Venus in Taurus, or Venus in Scorpio first. And maybe there is room for redemption. It's going to have a lot to do with how Mercury and the Sun actually have their relationships to Jupiter. And I would say reserve judgment, because Jupiter is going to judge, that's for damn sure. So reserve judgment at a social level until these moments where there is this opportunity for redemption. And I'm not suggesting that there should be like just a blanket amnesty and be like, oh, no harm, right? People need to account for anything, and it's up to us to hold them accountable. And so this is going to be one of those times, Taurus, where you can reserve judgment in order to hear the pleas of the feminine and love and connection and value in relationship, before you really start expanding out into your social realm here with Jupiter, and start moving forward again. And we also have a third quarter moon, right, on the 16th. And so let me see where we're at here. Yes, on the 16th. So let's move forward a couple hours here so you can see it. And it's going to be in Leo. So, of course, it's going to be square because that's what these quarter moons are doing. So we're talking about your fourth house, Taurus. Leo is your fourth house. And this is where you feel strong and supported and emotionally vulnerable at the same time, where you feel the core of your own root system. And so the fourth house is that deep interpersonal life, your private life, right? Which is so interesting that it would be Leo. So, the Taurus person is really feeling their character and their self-esteem, in terms of the heart, right? And the expression of the heart. And there's passion and strength here with Leo, and a sense of royalty and regalness. You're only really going to see it, I think, probably the most with a Taurus person, like really in, you see it in their character, but it's a function of the community, the family, the inner spiritual, the inner circle, and their own core, right? So the moon coming through your fourth house, Taurus, and of course squaring the sun again, that's in a quincunx to Mars, right? 24 to 25 degrees of Scorpio, is the moon in the fourth is deeply sensitive, and it can be kind of hard to come out of this place. And in Leo, it's going to be deeply sensitive to your need to just be unique in your voice in order to find your character and self-esteem. So you have everything you need here, and you may need to kind of sink down into the root system in order to draw those waters out that you need, the emotional waters. Because again, identifying with the X-ray photograph, you may be very penetrating in your relationships in terms of what you're illuminating, right? It may be an X-ray, an X-ray frequency is very high energy, right? And that's why it's able to look through organic tissue at, your bones and stuff. And so that's also the type of solar flare that comes off the sun that causes real problems, right? And that's what 25 degrees Scorpio, strangely enough, represents, is that X-ray photograph. It's not the X-ray itself. It's the image that is captured from the intensity of that energy, right? And so I think it may be, where it's a crisis in consciousness with your third quarter moon. And so, what are you conscious of? Where is your consciousness? Again, the identity here and the outward expression, it continues to be in your relationship. Who are you relative to your relationship? And really identifying with that. This is going to bring your emotional sensitivity, your adaptability into your own character, your own sense of loyalty, and your own sense of loyalty and a sense of really noble energy in your private or inner life. And it's enough that it's going to draw your attention away from fully being that penetrating factor and identifying with what you're seeing, right? You see the X-ray photograph, you get down into beyond the surface, into the structural knowledge, and identifying with that can really be destabilizing even more. Of course, with Uranus in your first, of course it is. But the moon here is going to be like, yo, you got this, right? You got everything you need in your root system right now, in that sense of who you are and where you belong. So if you don't like what you are seeing in, or what is illuminated at that X-ray level in your relationships and the nature of them, this is going to pull your awareness into a feeling of, I have everything that I need, right? So maybe it is structurally unsound there and it's just being brought to the surface, Taurus. Maybe it is even more, there's more depth, there's more down there than you could have ever imagined. And that also gives you a lot of you get really identified with that. This also will pull you down into that where your waters come from, right? Your inner emotional power that you do give to relationship. And, you may want to kind of conserve it a little bit or just be more sensitive to it. So it can go either way in this case. And let's see here. That's the third quarter moon. And again, the trines to Jupiter. Venus comes into Sag. Now, this is where Sag season for the Taurus person comes into their 8th house, where they actually share themselves and what is returned on that investment, right? So Venus, a lot more fun to be around in Sagittarius, right? Definitely much more interested in the big picture here in terms, and really a lot of sharing of understanding, right? A lot of value and a lot of warmth in the sharing of understanding, especially understanding of oneself after what is learned from relationship. So the 16th and the 17th, we're going to see Venus and then Mercury move into Sagittarius, your 8th house, right? And so it becomes a little bit more, I don't want to say bearable, but you also have Mars that's going to be now in a square to Neptune. So this is the second, right? Do you remember the first one? It was a slap in the face. Now it's going back over this stuff in this internalized and much more internalized, conservative of your resources energy. Still Neptune retrograde, but now in a slightly different position or degree. But while that's happening and kind of building, right? This is building up on the 16th, the 17th. We have things moving into Sagittarius and the 8th house. Now, Mercury is at its detriment in Sagittarius because it is opposite its home sign of Gemini. So Mercury doesn't really want to expand into understanding in the big picture. Mercury is riding the light beam, and so it is riding the wave as a wave function, knowing that the whole thing is a beam of light. And so coming into, but the good news about this, I feel like, is that at the very least, there can be an objective perspective on what is generated in this area and be able to really recognize patterns in terms of what is shared and what is generated out of what is shared, and really be able to problem solve. In this area, it's just, it gets pulled, it can be very swift and almost to the point where you don't really have control over your mental energy. You're kind of just getting pulled into the reaction. So that's something to consider as well. But again, Mars is helping conserve these energies by pulling this action and your resources, being more conservative about it, or going back over old, weaving or a switchback, right? That's what it feels like to me in some ways, is a switchback, right? And especially in the second house, you really are going back, seemingly backwards. Maybe you are retracing your steps. And this will maybe come out a lot more when in December, when Mercury and Venus are in opposition to, and the Sun will come into an opposition with Mars. But for now, it's really more about the way that these two are coming into this mutable sign of Sag, and of course, so is the Sun. But Mars and Neptune are coming into that second square. So maybe less of a slap in the face, because Mars is just like, well, you already slapped me once, so let me go back and kind of, take that energy and make and at least start to integrate it into my objective reality in a way that is actually imaginative and creative, right? And the square with Neptune is just like, there is something that we need, there is this cosmic and higher purpose here that we're all, being deeply drawn to. And for the Taurus person, in terms of an idealized cosmic society, and Mars is going to be like, well, tough shit, like, you're going to have to wait because I got work to do with what's right in front of me. And that square is I feel like it'll be less of the slap in the face, but also maybe kind of not necessarily returning the favor, but also just kind of like, all right, fine, this is what I'm doing, and really challenging this perspective, or just this experience up here of like this cosmic realization of an idealized society, and what it takes from each of us at a spiritual level. It's okay. Just lean into where it's uncomfortable, because it's probably less of a slap in the face and more maybe beating yourself up with Mars retrograde. But I would say just conserving your energy a little bit in this situation. So maybe it's not nearly as impactful, but is something, like I said, using creative imagination to make the most of it, whatever it is. So 16th, 17th, even though you're starting to become way more, thinking about and feeling this sharing energy coming into Sagittarius. And the moon is in Virgo, comes into Libra, and then more trines to Jupiter, actually. So as we go through here, so the Mars square is building 17th, 18th, into the 19th, and we're getting to the end here. So now the moon's going to come into Libra. So Taurus, the first and sixth house are naturally in a quincunx. So the moon's going to come into this fifth house and be like, okay, before it was in Virgo, and it's going to pass over Ceres, and it's going to have that volcanic eruption again. And this time it's going to come through like a very emotional and passionate expression, and then come into the sixth. And there's going to be a steep sensitivity and a need to adapt that passionate explosion into something formidable, something that is actually in nuts and bolts reality. And it'll be an idea. The ideas that you are still working with Mars over here in your second house in Gemini. And now, but what am I going to do with it, right? How am I going to, really make the most of this in terms of my own personal growth, healing, facing a crisis, anything like that. And so as we coming into the balsamic moon, of course, it's going to, Taurus, you're just going to have that, deep sense of within yourself, where's the equilibrium in terms of what you are doing, your works, your labors, your healing process, right? Where things belong in your life and what you're doing about it. So, and that's going to have, that's going to be in a quincunx to all of this energy over in Pisces, but that's important because it does lead to that, but you still have to get it, get your own system down. You have to get your own health in order. You have to get your own challenges surmounted. You have to do your own work, and that's the 6th house. So I think that Taurus, by the time we get to the end of the lunar cycle, you're going to be like, okay, I kind of see now, like what, this was more prominent and present at the equinox time in December or September. So now it's just another coming back around emotionally, intuitively, feeling wise, and being like, okay, yeah, I remember when I was doing these things and I was applying this knowledge into these forms, and now to create these forms. So come back around again to consider that. What am I going to do with all of these resources? It's not enough to just conserve them and be like, you know what, I don't want to share any of my ideas. Fuck you. It just came out. And Taurus can be like that, right? Very private into being very just stubborn, right? And so, again, I think that there's going to be a lot of learning about that. And so on the 21st, which is going to be really cool, Taurus, something's going to wake up in you on the 21st. This is when Venus and Mercury are conjunct in Sagittarius. It's going to be glorious, right? This alchemical fire at the pit of the center of where your power is generated in your relationships. You're going to become very aware of that alchemical fire. It's going to be something you could communicate, something that you feel good about communicating, something that you want to express, and something in terms of like some optimism here and feeling into how that energy that is born of friction is actually something that is catalyzing a creation. And that's going to be something, Taurus, you're really going to feel it. Oh, wow, in that area. That's kind of exciting, actually. And again, the sun's coming into the last degrees of Scorpio. It's about to come into Sag. And so it's going to have also the same trine to Jupiter that's just about to station direct as well, as we're coming into Sagittarius season, actually. That's really awesome as well. And so there'll be a lot of this finally just identifying with the redemption, right? The love as a principle of redemption, and realizing that, the divine source is the same throughout the entire creation, and it's through the prism, right, which is some sort of substance that refracts light, that you get to see all of the colors of the rainbow. So Taurus, reserve your judgment. There's things you're going to be learning about yourself through the course of your relationships that are not necessarily going to come to full realization in terms of you until probably 6 months from now, but it's your optimism and a sense of honesty, and really giving of yourself into the, what you get out of the relationships is really going to be very favorable, I think, for this Thanksgiving and for this new moon, because this is where Jupiter is going to station direct at the new moon, which is at 2 degrees Sagittarius. So let's go back a little and take a look at that. Forward. Sorry, it's on the 23rd. My bad. It's on the 23rd. November. So this is the day before Thanksgiving. Yeah, Thanksgiving I think is going to be really good. Jupiter stations direct in Pisces, right? There's going to be a lot of forgiveness. There's going to be a lot of, there's going to be a lot of spirit moving through conversations and family gatherings and such that are really going to stimulate some waves. Absolutely. But with also the idea that there's going to be real healing here, I think. And Jupiter will station direct and start expanding in the realm of the social realm. And so with all of the energy in Sagittarius, in your 8th house, 11th house, you can see now, Taurus, that a lot of the energy now is coming back around to your social identity again. And It's going to be interesting when all of this stuff later comes into opposition with Mars, but we can cross that bridge when we get to it. So Taurus, that is your forecast for this full moon, which is also a total lunar eclipse. So if you are interested in your own personal reading, your natal chart, your progressions, your relevant starseed markings, you have access to the lunar transit forecast through Catalyst Energies. Let's see here. Let me find it. At the sale rate. So you can go to the website that is linked in the description box below, and you can book the lunar transit forecast at the sale rate under the bookings tab. And you can either get a quick tune-up, 30-minute recorded reading for $33, or you can get the more in-depth, hour-long reading for $66. And we can look at whatever portion of this lunar cycle is relevant to you. If you want to look from retroactively from the solar eclipse all the way to the end of the lunar cycle, if you want to start at the full moon lunar eclipse and go to the next full moon, whatever it is, you have access as a Taurus sun, moon, or rising to this sale forecast. Also, if you are a member through Subscribestar, even at the $3 or tier 1 membership subscription rate, you actually have access to the sale rate for all of the lunar transit forecasts, no matter what your sign is. So one of the perks of actually being a monthly subscriber. So you can also find information about that in the description box below as well. Taurus, salt of the earth, my friends. We need you to really embody who you truly are, because that's where we're going right now. And so for all of us, truly, it's through the lens of relationship, but it's going to be through the relationships will be changing as a result of the ripples that you are causing in the changes in who you are, and your soul pulling you back towards who you are. And so pay attention to the change in the reflection. You'll learn a lot from it rather than identifying with the distortions in your relationships, okay? I think that's probably the best takeaway I can give you for this time. So thank you for being here, guys. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. I will see you on the next video, which is the Starseed Ministry on Monday the 7th. And if you are a monthly subscriber, I will see you on your next video, which I believe will be a weekly forecast with the full moon lunar eclipse. So thanks, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.